Hey everybody, it's Trags, and this week on Red Sox Beat, I go outside the box just a little bit and outside New England to bring you, I think, one of the most unique voices in all of baseball. Someone I get to listen to every night on TV for Bally Sports Ohio, covering the Cincinnati Reds here in Cincinnati. His name is John Sadak. You can follow him on Twitter, and you should. John Sadak, John Sadak, all one word. John, this is a pleasure for me because ever since you started in April with actually March, right? The last day of March, was it? Or for April 1st, opening day with the Reds. It's been quite a journey.
It has. This is the culmination of a lifetime's worth of work to have a major league chance. You know, these jobs are so precious and so rare and just don't come open. And it's something I really did not think would ever happen. And I'm delighted that I'm here talking with you right now.
What was the background leading up to it? Tell us a little bit about the last couple of years, because, you know, talk to Will Fleming about, the work he did toiling in the minor league system. I'm sure you did the same.
Yeah, he and I were together in both A-ball and in AAA. He was with the Nationals Club in Potomac. I was with what was most of that time a Royals team in Wilmington, Delaware. Then he moved up to Indianapolis with the Pirates before he went to Pawtucket. I had spent that time with the Yankees AAA team in Scranton. And to be honest, after 15 years for me in minor league baseball, which I adored and I loved, I was married, I had a child, and our daughter was becoming very aware of how much I was gone.
Yes.
So 2017 was my last year in minor league baseball. Our team hosted the AAA championship game. And the day after that, I was home. My family was living in Wilmington, Delaware still. I was up in Scranton. It's about a 3 to 3.5 hour ride with traffic, depending. I had not seen my daughter in 3+ weeks. Mm-hmm. And I went in to kiss her goodbye as she was going off to pre-K, and she latched a hand onto each cheek, yanked my nose right up against hers and said, "Dad, be home more." And that stabbed me right in the heart. And I sent my resignation letter in the next day. I was out of baseball entirely in 2018. 2019, I filled in for the Mets on radio. Yep. The rough plan is that I was going to fill in for both the Mets and the Yankees in 2020, but the pandemic hit. And I went almost a year with no work, no money. And then this opportunity came up.
What a story. That's a phenomenal story. And it's one of perseverance, because we all have heard the story, right, John, about the players who go through hell to try and realize their major league dream. And the bus rides are epic. Obviously, some of the hotel rooms are epic, and the stories in those hotels on the road and in the minor leagues. But you don't often hear what the announcers go through. And everybody's going to say, or a lot of people are going to think, well, he's fortunate to be doing what he loves to do. And, that's just part of it, part of toiling away in the minor leagues. But it's something. I went through it, and I told Will this. I was with the Watertown Indians for 3 years in the New York Pen. I did play-by-play there. I helped out with the Canton Akron Indians back in the day in, I believe that would have been, what league is that, John? Help me out. The Double-A. It was the Double-A league, Double-A affiliate of the Cleveland Indians. So Eastern League. It was the Eastern League. And so I can relate with what guys like you go through. But for me, it was a matter of, I'm just going to move on to something else. And that's when I just, we talked before we started recording this about what brought me to Boston. And what brought me to Boston was my desire to, force getting to a big market on myself. And that's why I think your story is so, compelling, for lack of a better word. Now, one of the reasons I'm having you on, John, is because when I listen to your broadcast, and now we live in the 21st century, you can listen to pretty much any broadcast anywhere, thanks to MLB.com, and your enthusiasm, and B, your ability to integrate every bit of minutia that you research into your broadcast and make it consumable for the viewer is amazing to me. And I call you TR Sadak, Total Recall Sadak. And it's amazing. And I want to get an idea from you how you make integrating all of the statistics that you research day after day after day into your broadcast? How do you go about doing that?
Well, the truth is I don't use probably 80% of the stuff that I have.
That's unbelievable.
Because it doesn't fit.
Right.
Yeah, it's and I try not to overload the viewer. And I know that there is no true sweet spot. You're always going to have some fraction or segment of your audience that thinks it's too much or too little or contrived or insincere or whatever.
Right.
So what I try to do is I really picture it as, what would I want? What do I want to hear when I'm in a broadcast? And so I try to give not just data, but human stories, or some kind of parallel or a pop culture joke, or just whatever I think fits and feels in that moment. And sometimes the thing that fits best is nothing. Sometimes the thing that fits best is silence and that sound. But I have everything written down between a combination of my scorebook. I have a running Word doc on each team. So to be honest, that's something I'm still kind of learning, because my first year in the majors, I'm able to use certain information and certain comparisons and allegories that just don't work in minor league baseball. You can't reference doing the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Rail Riders or the Wilmington Blue Rocks. You can't reference some player or moment or game or run from 1997 and have immediate true association among the fan base. It just doesn't, there aren't that many people that follow it that way. In Major League Baseball, I can bring up the 97 Reds, or I can bring up a comparison to a significant Hall of Fame player of another franchise, and it can lead down a different kind of a path. So I'm still learning how to organize and use that information. And I think that's something that every game, every moment, every play, I'm still very malleable, and I'm kind of changing my point of view on it.
So obviously 10 years ago, even, we didn't have Baseball Savant. We didn't have baseball. We didn't have Fangraphs. We didn't have, what other site would you say you use the most in terms of doing your data, your research?
Well, we have some proprietary stuff that Bally Sports Ohio affords us access to. So we use Sport Radar, we use Remarkable, and they're basically by association. They pull data from a lot of those same sources, but they're able to populate it in a way that what's most interesting and put it in direct context within relation to that position group, or within his era, or within a certain sphere of years. That makes it, significant.
And you also have, and I'm sure you'll be happy to give props to the producers behind the scenes, as any play-by-play announcer would do, especially at the major league level. You have Joel Luckoff, who does a pretty incredible job behind the scenes, helping you do a lot of Reds research, I'm sure, because he knows just so much. And you also have a tremendous producer at Bally Sports Ohio. You have a lot of guys behind the scene helping you out.
Yeah, I mean, TV, I've always said this, and I really believe it. Sports television is a team sport. And that, to me, is the biggest difference among the many between radio and TV. And I've been lucky, and I've really enjoyed working in both. Radio is almost exclusively the play-by-play person's medium. Rarely, particularly in baseball, do you even have an analyst who is an accomplished player or coach. It's usually another play-by-play person that's doing it with you.
Right.
Where TV, it's so communal. It's everybody working together. And that's where I'm incredibly fortunate that there is such a legacy within this Reds broadcast. Most of our crew members in every regard, from our A1s to our camera folks to everybody in the truck, TD and graphics, and they've been doing this for decades. So they have immediate frame of reference for all these moments that, they can pitch something, or they can just suggest a shot to our director, and then our producer can get in my ear. And Joel Luckoff is our lead statistician. Yes. And he is not only brilliant, but he's a multiple times published author on Reds history. And he's created his own Excel-based series of spreadsheets that he can give instant historical perspective on what any accomplishment is for any one player or the team within the context of the franchise.
Perspective and context. To me, again, John, what impresses, and speaking with John Sadak, the tremendously talented, gifted, and enthusiastic TV voice of the Cincinnati Reds for Bally Sports Ohio, what impresses me is giving context and perspective with all of the data that's out there now, and making sure that when you use it, when you're on the air with Reds Hall of Famer Barry Larkin, you throw it out there and then you allow him to give some context to it, right?
Yes, and that still is part of the working element for me, is working with three different primary partners. Lark and I are together for all the home games. Most of the road games, I'm with Chris Welsh, who has been the standard analyst on this package for 3 decades. And then I'm with Cowboy Jeff Brantley. This series right now, as we're recording this, we're together for the Royals series. And
The
they each
proud Mississippi State alum, I might add.
That's very true. Yes, national champs, first team national title in program history. And he'll gladly regale all tales of Bulldog greatness.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
But they all have their own strengths. And so I'm learning what they like, how they like to talk about it, what they're readily able and eager to expand upon. And also where I can fit in the non-baseball stuff, what plays with each one of them to make it loose, to make it fun. And they're all a treasure and they're all fantastic to be with. But yes, I think that's one of the luxuries of being on TV in Major League Baseball, as opposed to radio or pretty much any position you could be in the minors, is, these are tremendous ambassadors for the game, who have instant credibility and who know things that I'll never know. I learn something sitting next to each one of them every single game.
Speaking with John Sadak, the TV play-by-play voice, there it is, of the Cincinnati Reds for Bally Sports Ohio. Do you do much on Instagram? I know you said you'd like to get back in doing that once you get back to travel, which you're not doing yet, I guess.
Yeah, I struggle while we're doing these games from the studio with images that would be really compelling or interesting to folks. My life is pretty mundane right now. I'm living in a small apartment down near the ballpark and where our studio is, and I pretty much go A to B to A to B to A to B every single day.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not the easiest thing in the world. I'm sure it hasn't been easy doing these games off a TV monitor, which is obviously what you're doing. On Monday night, of course, the Reds had their 5th straight come from behind win. First time since, I believe, 1995 that has happened. The Reds have had 5 straight come from behind wins. And of course, they won the division that year. That was the last year, John, I'm sure you know this by now, that the Cincinnati Reds won a postseason series.
Indeed. And I think there's a decent chance that this bunch, could erase that. They still have some climbing to do in their division. But yeah, it's, calling games off a monitor is a challenge. It's hardest in baseball, in my opinion, in reading fly balls, because you learn, this, when you're a play-by-play guy, you don't watch the swing, you watch the outfielder.
Sure.
And the setup off a monitor, it's mixed. It's very difficult to get depth and feel for that off of a monitor. But it helps for me that, a lot of my national work in the fall and the winter time, I did 3 college football games, 2 NFL games, including a playoff game, and almost all of my college basketball outside of the NCAA tournament off of a monitor. And, comparatively, basketball is by far the easiest sport to do that in. But just those repetitions, learning how to deal with the delay, learning how to deal with screen images that may freeze or hiccup from time to time, that prepared me immensely. If I had gone exclusively into baseball without any of that prior monitor experience, I think the first month would have been a lot rougher.
Yeah, I'm sure it would have been, but you're a pro and you are able to figure things like that out. Over the weekend, I got to tell you, John, and I saw you at Great American Ballpark on the 3rd and the 4th. I was covering the Cubs for MLB.com. To see Great American Ballpark full, certainly on Friday night for fireworks night, and even Saturday and Sunday, very good crowds, lively crowds, of course, because there was a lot of Cubs fans on hand for all 3 games. You compare that with what I went through, and everybody back in the Boston media went through a year ago at Fenway, watching the Red Sox work out. The season, of course, hadn't even started yet. And it was just so surreal, eerie almost, and watching the players play in an empty ballpark. To have come this far, I think we're very lucky and fortunate to have baseball back.
I would totally agree. And I think I would agree with you also that, this last series represented that first flush feel of what we remember, of what those epic, divisional battles, a full ballpark that is just brimming with energy. There is a tangible feel to what is immaterial. That there is a sense of power to the presence of the fan. And I think the Reds were on the other end of it when they were in San Diego.
Yes.
Padres had their reopening day, had their first 100% capacity. Reds got swept in that first game. The Reds had roared back. They hung 4 on the board in the 9th inning. India hit that huge home run. And their fans, the Padre fans, seemingly willed them to that comeback. Eric Hosmer said after the game that he did not think they would have rallied, nor would he have hit that home run without the energy from that full stadium. It's a real component, and it's part of what makes live sports so compelling. It's what makes it great.
With regard to that, to watch Nick Castellanos and Jesse Winker on an everyday basis, they are 2 baseball superstars, really under stars right now. Maybe not superstars. Maybe that's a little bit of the Big Red Machine influence coming in and prejudice coming out right now. But they're certainly stars of the game. They're young stars. They're up and comers. Nick Castellanos has been around a few years with the Tigers and Cubs, but Jesse Winker, see those 2 beat out Mookie Betts in all-star voting in the outfield shocked me.
Yeah, I mean, they're deserving. They should have.
Yeah, they are, but it's still, you consider it's Mookie, and we know how big Mookie was out in Boston. Yeah. And he goes to LA. He is on a World Series team for the second time in 3 seasons, right? And I was surprised, even though Jesse and Nick are having great years, to watch them, rise above and beat out Mookie in all-star balloting just impressed me, I guess.
Yeah, and I think there's a combination of, number one, their numbers are just their numbers. I mean, their numbers right at the time of voting were elite and more than deserving. But I also think the other piece to it is that this Reds team and those 2 leading at the 4 of it, they are a compelling watch. I think to your point, what MLB.TV has done for the baseball fan and allowed you to consume so much more, such a wider world than we ever, were privy to before. If you were to just spin the wheel on random MLB team of the night, I don't know that there are that many teams that would give the unsuspecting, random viewer a consistent, compelling watch the same way these Reds do. They are plucky. They are fun. There is a looseness about them. That whole let the kids play mentality is embodied by this team.
For that.
The Padres are at the 4, as they should be, because they're super talented and they were expected to win a lot. Where Cincinnati, I think nationally, has been viewed as this dark horse. And this team wears that with a badge of honor. They embrace it. Go ahead. Doubt us. Put us in the middle of the pack. Don't believe in us. They use that as fuel. They feast on that. And I think there is a little bit of magic to how this team has won when they've won, and even how they've lost at times in the fight that they demonstrate. And I think Castellanos and Winker embody that. And I think the casual fan watches for a couple of games or even sees the highlights. I think that comes across.
So I think there have been a couple of great moments in the first half of the year for the Reds. But when the Reds looked a little bit dead in the water in that Monday night makeup game a week ago against the Phillies, and Castellanos came up to the plate and connected for the grand slam, I thought, to me, that was the best moment of the first half so far. And it really, ever since that moment, yes, they lost the first 2 games to the Padres before coming back in heroic fashion on Thursday night and winning that game. But that grand slam to me was a pivotal moment for the Reds.
Yeah, I think there have been so many. I would echo that. I mean, I think his flex, right from the get-go against St. Louis is certainly one of those genuine moments. Winker having 2-3 home run games and getting clearly overtly emotional afterward and just bearing his soul and being so honest about it and relatable. I think there have been such a sequence of those types of moments. And that's the allure of live sport. It is truly unscripted drama. We are in the golden age of produced television and to some extent film. There's amazing fictional content out there, some of which is based loosely in reality, and it's awesome. And I love pop culture and I love all of it. But nothing can replicate the sense of awe, of wonder, of true chills that live sport can produce, because it is that last it's that last unpredictable element that nobody can see coming, and you just enjoy it. You bask in it. Sometimes you cry at it. It depends upon how it goes for your respective team or player, but it draws out that authentic humanity.
Well, to your point, John, it is to me, and I told my sister this last night when I was complaining about my cable being out. Sports is single-handedly keeping I don't cable or traditional TV alive. And it's why so many of these networks are spending literally billions of dollars for the rights, because they realize the lifeblood that these live sports are. I happen to believe, John, that while people are concerned about the CBA expiring at the end of this Major League Baseball season, this time I do think that both sides realize they're not going to kill the golden goose. A deal is going to get done. You agree?
I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so. I tend to be a more optimistic person. And perhaps I think the augmentation of the existing CBA to get through the pandemic year, which was not handled great. It was very public. It was stretched out. But I think that could be good practice. That maybe underscores, and gave that precursor to like the necessity to get things done.
So to me, the difference between the two, with COVID, I think the players felt like it was being rammed down their throat. Yes, they wanted to have a baseball season, but it got to the point where there was health concerns. There were legitimate health concerns about trying to force everybody to play when there was so much health uncertainty. Now, when you're talking about extending the contract, let's say 8 to 10 years, if you can do what some of the other sports have been able to do, if you could do that, it's about money. And money speaks louder than anything else. And it would be in the best interest of both sides to get it done. I am convinced, I won't be told otherwise, that a deal will get done. So there's my feeling on that. I'm going to be positive like you always are, John, on Reds broadcast. You do keep a very positive beat. Do you ever get feedback that you're too positive or no?
Yeah, there's some people who believe it's a put on, who think it's fake or insincere. That's really me. Like the experience of the viewer, to let you know through the lens and context of my family. Like that's what my wife experiences when I'm watching games. What you're hearing from me, that is me. Like that is how I take in sport. If I weren't announcing, I wouldn't be talking quite as much, but the experience would be very similar.
Yeah, so I'll be very honest. So I'm more of the staid conservative Midwestern baseball fan. I'm an old timer. I'm 55. Grew up with the Big Red Machine, like I said. So my perspective on hearing broadcasts, when I heard you for the first time, my eyes opened. I'm not going to lie. Okay, my eyes open. I'm like, wow, this is a lot different than what the traditional the old time Reds fans grew up with. But I've got to tell you that over time, to hear somebody who really loves the game and loves the team that they're broadcasting for, and wants to see them do well, it's refreshing. It really is.
Yeah, to me, I mean, the whole point of sport is to have fun, right? Like that's why we do it. We don't do it to be sad. We don't do it to anticipate the bad. And that's not to say I get it. It's really reflexive. It's built up over time. If you precede the disappointment by predicting disappointment, then it doesn't injure you as much. And I get that. I totally understand that. But to me, I'd rather forecast the joy, feel the joy in the moments, look for silver linings, have fun with it. And I also think that's where and why baseball, more than any other sport, because of its relative downtime of ball and play action, affords us the chance for conversation that can go beyond the game. That's what we do when we're in the stands, right? Yeah. Like if the game's miserable, if your team is up, down 10 runs, you're already there, you've had a beer, you're having a hot dog, you talk about something else. And that's what I try and like to do. Let's go in some other direction. Now, don't ignore the game. The game is still the star, and the game's going to dictate as stuff happens. but, wrapped around those moments. And you do games long enough, particularly with any one team, you can kind of sense the rhythmic nature of the team. You kind of know when
Right.
there's going to be a very long inning, when there's going to be a short inning, when that moment's going to happen, when to shut up and lay out. And in the time in between, try to be funny, make a joke, have fun, ask somebody something that's not related to baseball, see where it goes, and you might be able to tie it right back into the moment in that game.
Speaking with John Sadak, the TV play-by-play voice of the Cincinnati Reds for Bally Sports Ohio, from the sublime to the ridiculous, the Hall of Fame debate. John, you made a point on the air a couple of weeks ago that I thought was very, very interesting, and that is about the body that elects players to the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. And obviously, a lot of our viewers and listeners know Roger Clemens, Manny Ramirez. Those are two names that come to mind. Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa. The demographics of the baseball writers of America is changing to a younger demographic. And you made the point recently about how that could impact the way these players get in or don't get in. Explain.
I think as the voting body gets younger, you're going to see two major changes. I think number one, you're going to see a less emotional attachment based upon personal experience with players, which is a significant influence. If a player was combative or reluctant or difficult with media, I do think that has a real impact on the voting body.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think you're going to see a bigger embracing of sabermetrics, of context within their era beyond pure counting volume numbers, of not to discount that there's no value in it. There is, but there's more than just that. And I think probably the best example of that is the Reds' Joey Votto. I think if Joey Votto composed his career as it stands 15 years earlier and was already retired, he would be swimming upstream some for many of the voters to be a Hall of Famer. I think at his current age in production relative to the here and now of 2021, he is positioned perfectly that, after he's done and his window passes and what that voting body will be at the time, that the rate numbers he put up and what he did relative to what was important and others at his position in his era, I think he will be a deserving and appropriate Hall of Fame player.
I think four of the six metrics on Baseball Reference have him getting into the Hall of Fame, and I do think he'll get in. The old timers, the old school, would say, yeah, but what did he do in the playoffs? Kind of the reflexive, the corollary of what Curt Schilling went through, right? It's Curt Schilling's all about what he did in the postseason, whereas I think Joey Votto is the more traditional candidate because he has put up numbers, especially on base numbers, that we just haven't seen from that position in a long, long, long time.
Yeah, I think he was ahead of the curve. I think he still is. It's I think he is among the smartest, most prepared, truly cerebral players that we have ever seen. That he is always trying to see where there is a deficit within the game, where and how his skill set aligns with that, and how to best take advantage of it. And by the way, he's really friggin' good. I mean, and look what he's doing now. 37 years old.
Right. I got to tell you, the way he got off to the start he got off this season was not encouraging. I mean, it looked like he was a little bit slow to start, but ever since he's come back from the injured list, he looks like a different player. He looks refreshed, for one thing, and maybe that's all he needed was some time off.
Well, the one counter I would make, though, is that, he had the COVID-related scare in spring training, and that cost him basically 3 weeks.
Yep.
He really didn't have a spring training. And for somebody who's going through a significant an approach and swing change, as he, started during the course of last year when he sat for those 3 straight days, but was continuing to be augmented and implemented this year, that had a major impact. And then compound that with he was starting to get going and he broke the thumb. Where he is right now, I think, is where he would have been third week of April if, he had a normal spring training and didn't have the thumb injury. And then imagine what could have been accomplished to this point if all of that kind of dominoed. I mean, the game's the game, but, he had never had an injury like that thumb injury. And obviously nobody had ever dealt with COVID before COVID. And it interrupted a process and a very process-oriented player. He is that chess game 5 moves ahead guy who knows how long it can take for his body to recognize and be able to actually perform something that's pretty substantial.
He looked bigger and stronger to you right
Yeah,
now?
he looks like he's in amazing shape. I mean, to be honest, I wasn't around him, earlier in his
He
career. I
looks
can
bigger
only
to
look at
me.
video. But he, to me, what strikes me is when I do see him in person, and just the last couple of weeks we've been allowed on the field, pregame, he is an even more physically imposing man in person than he comes across on TV. And he's just in incredible shape. He keeps himself in awesome shape. And he uses every ounce of that to his advantage, both at the plate, and we've seen him make some pretty big plays in the field. A huge double play in that Cubs series on that leaping grab on that 3-6-3 that changed the game.
Look, I just think, like you said before, I think not only Joey Votto, but I think this Reds team is one to keep an eye on for the rest of the year if they can stay healthy. Between Castellanos and Winker, which are obvious. I love watching Jonathan India. I made the point a couple of weeks back that Jonathan India reminds me of Dustin Pedroia. Energy, he's all over the field. Great, quick feet, quick hands, and he's just got that passion for the game at the top of the lineup. He's, a spark plug. Not only is he a spark plug, but I think he re-energizes the team on those nights in the middle of a season where the team could be honestly or understandably dragged.
Yeah, I think Joey Votto has said that India was the direct inspiration for him in the second win that he's had emotionally, in his own expressiveness, kind of demonstrating that joy on the field. And and India and Tyler Stevenson, who's another kind of under the radar rookie on this team, at least going into yesterday, I haven't looked to prepare yet for tonight. They were 1-2 in on-base percentage among rookies in all of Major League Baseball. And they've both been cold-blooded killers in super high-leverage spots. Yep. It looks like no moment is too big for them. And they're part of nearly a dozen rookies, Vladimir Gutierrez, Tony Santillan, Alejo Lopez, that have been brought up and thrust into significant moments for this team. And they've delivered it. It's not a one-off, one game. We're talking about months of composed success.
India's home run against Mark Melancon was that would have been arguably the best moment of the first half of the season had they not, given up the 4 runs in the bottom of the 9th inning. But that's, water under the bridge, as they say, John. And still, that game, when we saw that performance from Jonathan India, that kind of speaks of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, that's who he is, and he got him a couple of more times later in the series too. He worked a walk, he had another base hit, both in 9th innings when the Reds were trying to rally against, that same baseball leader in saves. And the only times he's lost when he's blown saves this year has been against the Reds, and half of his blown saves have come against the Reds. So there is that pluckiness to this team. And I think David Bell has been an under the radar managerial success too. He, by his general nature, is kind of quiet, understated, has a measured, long view kind of picture. He was assailed for the bullpen's failings in the early stage of the year. I would contend that on most of those decisions, I think he made the right choice. It just wasn't executed. And we saw a bit of a carousel and, who populated the bullpen. And oddly enough, with their 2 best now sidelined to injury, and Lucas Sims and TJ Antone, they're actually pitching their best baseball by far of the season for 2.5 weeks running now.
David Bell deserves credit exactly for that point, John, because, given the fact that you're without your best back end high leverage pitchers, he has had to mix and match the last 4 or 5 games, and they've won all of them. And, he hasn't overexposed anybody. I think there was a thought, maybe several weeks back, 3 or 4 weeks back, that he was overexposing that bullpen, which happened to be a weakness of the team. And I think he has stepped on the pedal a little bit more with the starters, and they've responded, and it's shortened the exposure of the bullpen, and it's made them more effective. That's my take on that.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't know that he could have done that earlier, because Luis Castillo, up until 6 weeks ago, it was not pretty, and he was still very much a work in progress. Sonny Gray has dealt with a back issue twice this year, at a spring training, and again nearly on the shelf for a month. Just came back, in the last week.
Right.
And those are two. Michael Lorenzen still has yet to play. Just got transferred to AAA Louisville. Hopefully, he might be part of this team in a relief capacity going into the All-Star break. So he was leaning on starters. Jeff Hoffman, who got hurt, struggled a lot with walks, a very high pitch count. Tyler Mahle, who's had a really good year, sometimes if he doesn't have feel for that slider, he was perfect against the Cubs through, 4 innings on like 90 pitches. Every count was going full. And I also think the biggest wrinkle to this year, and it's not specific to the Reds, this is all of baseball, is teams are in this real uncharted water of what's going to happen with pitchers as they greatly move past their pitch numbers, their inning count of last year. Because of the shortened season, how is that going to affect arm injury? Because the only known commodity has always been about the young pitcher. The young pitcher, if you see giant innings jumps, there's a percentage threshold that as you spike it by too much, the injury rate goes up, geometrically higher. So they're always very careful with those younger arms. We don't know how in a 7-year major league veteran, if they throw twice as many innings in 1 year versus the other, are they far more likely to get hurt? What kind of injury? How much does that cost of that time? These are guaranteed contracts, let alone the wins and losses that happen or don't without their presence.
It has been great talking to you, John. How are you going to spend the All-Star break? With your daughter, I hope?
Moving. So we close on a house in Greater Cincinnati on that Monday. I fly back with my wife and daughter on Tuesday. Our movers come on Wednesday to our home in Delaware in Greater Philadelphia. And then between Wednesday evening and Thursday, we'll be driving back west to Cincinnati. My wife's car is still out east, and we'll be getting settled in our new home.
It's great to have you back here in the Midwest. I'm glad we could both move back to the Midwest at the same time.
Amen. I'm with you.
Yeah, it's been great, and certainly has been fun listening to you and Barry Larkin. Chris Welsh and the Cowboy, Jeff Brantley, do games on Bally Sports Ohio. You got a great team over there. I don't want to forget Sam LaCour. I don't want to forget Brian Giesenslaw. It's a great team on Bally Sports Ohio. I tune in every night, half hour before every game for the pregame. I watch Reds live after every broadcast. I learn something new about the Reds every single time I tune in, which means you're doing your job damn well.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to have the gig and to call all those men and women teammates, and very happy and delighted to be with you as well. Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate it, John. Want to thank everybody for downloading today's podcast. Thank our terrific guest, John Sadak, the one and only TV play-by-play voice of the Cincinnati Reds on Bally Sports Ohio. Follow him on Twitter at John Sadak, all one word, JOHNSADA.